Hey everyone, this is Mike Wolf and welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Eric Schulze, the VP of Product and Regulation for Upside Foods. That combination, being in charge of both regulation and product, is fairly unique for a food company. But when you look at the fact that Upside is a cell-based meat company and so much of what they'll be doing in the next few years depends on regulatory approval, it just makes a lot of sense. Eric's background is as an FDA regulator, so he has a lot of experience creating and understanding regulatory guidelines around food products. He's also super passionate about public service, and so that really shines through during our conversation, and just passionate about science in general. He was brought on to help develop the cell lines for a lot of the products that are ultimately going to be pushed out through Upside. And their first product is chicken, which we discuss on the podcast, which was announced just a few days before we recorded. So it's a really interesting and wide-ranging conversation, and I think you will enjoy it. So please listen to it. As usual, we recorded this one on Clubhouse live. So if you want to listen to these live, make sure to follow us on Clubhouse, the Food Tech Live Club. But that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Eric Schulze. This is a room that I'm really excited about having. I got to have a little bit of a conversation with Eric yesterday to get to know him a little bit better, but I think all of you will be excited to, and will find this a very educational experience, hearing from Eric. So Eric, let's just get the ball rolling. You're here, people are joining, and what we're going to talk about today is really building cell culture meat, this current state of cell culture meat, and your kind of unique experience at this intersection between building product and regulatory, which I think is really pretty fascinating. So just to kind of set the room and introduce you, you're Eric Schulze. Your title, your official title is VP of Product and Regulation at Upside Foods. Upside Foods, for those who don't know, was formerly Memphis Meats. That's a pretty unique combination, Eric. I don't often see people running product and also running regulatory affairs for companies. Why do you have this unique combined job?
Yeah, it's great. Well, one, I think, taking one step back,
yeah.
I have, as we discussed, we have athletes, we have professional athletes, you have professional artists, but we don't talk about science as a profession. But, I really do consider myself a professional scientist working alongside other professional scientists and professional engineers. So one thing, I think that's really important to call out. And I think what's interesting also is you're right. You don't often put product development and regulatory affairs together. But at Upside, early on, our co-founder, Uma Valetti, and I talked, and I joined in the late seed round as employee number 7. We talked about the notion of really building out a program that considered safety first and foremost in a novel food space, like what we're doing for cultured products. And so Upside, so Uma decided, and we talked about this, of building a product development program that had the useful constraint of the regulatory system around it. Now, how did we even arrive at that? The short version is, I worked at the Food and Drug Administration, and I was a policymaker for both food and drugs and novel biotechnologies. And I watched many companies succeed and unfortunately many not succeed because they had failed to consider the regulatory system here in the United States well before they designed their products. But I'll pause there because I could go into depth, but I do think that's sort of very useful constraint around developing products. But I can talk also about how, just candidly, designing food, it's such an intimate activity, and food has such deep rooted tradition in our society that we wanted to build products also that people intuitively could trust the safety of, that they knew they were getting a good product. And so therefore we wanted to put safety front and center.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll dive into that more and how you use really regulatory as kind of the guidepost for your product development, which I think makes a lot of sense as you are a maker of cell-based meat. And that's where I kind of want to go to set the table for folks who don't know, Upside Foods, which was renamed, it was Memphis Meats, is renamed to Upside. You guys basically make cell cultured meat. How would you do when you're talking to people at a party and you describe your company? How do you describe it?
We make real meat. We make real animal meat. This isn't plant-based. It is actual animal tissue made the same way it would be made in an animal, just outside the body. So even simpler, we make a very, very mundane product in an extraordinary way. I like to think of we've been eating domesticated animals on this planet for about 10,000 years. That's at the advent of agriculture. We started domesticating animals. We started eating them as well. But we've been eating meat for well over 2 million years on this planet. Persistent carnivory started around 2 million years ago. So it's a longstanding human tradition. But what we're doing is basically the idea of when you think of meat, and everyone here is probably thinking meat, you're probably thinking of an animal immediately. That's the first thing that goes in your mind. And so the idea that meat and animal can be decoupled or deconcatenated is what we've tried to do here. That meat doesn't necessarily need to be directly produced in an animal. It is a developmental container that we've obviated. So we produce the meat separately in a clean, controlled production environment and growing the same animal tissues that you would eat directly from an animal. So just produced a very different way.
Okay. And I do want to get into that more, how you guys are doing it and where you are today, because there's been some interesting news around Upside. But I want to kind of go back and give people a little bit of context about your own career, because I do think it's interesting. You know, you're obviously a scientist focused on biotech, but you had a pretty long and established career within the government. And so you don't often see people jumping from the FDA, for example, into startups. Talk a little bit about what you did for the FDA, because I think it's interesting, and I just think it's interesting that you came from there.
Shameless plug to anyone listening: civil service and is a wonderful, wonderful career. I highly encourage any scientist and engineer to consider at least a short stint in the federal government. You learn to understand how your science and what you do impacts the world, and that really what drove me. I'm a first generation college graduate in my family, and most of my family is military related or what have you. We moved around a lot, and they served their country that way. I decided serving my country would be through my mind and helping people's health and be able to make great decisions for their food and their family and their family life. So I have a doctorate in genetic, molecular, and cellular biology. And I worked as one of the first people to get a PhD in embryonic stem cell biology back when it was a little bit more controversial than it is today. Specifically, have a background in genetic engineering and genetic architecture. And I was recruited by the FDA. They were putting together, this is during the Obama administration, they're putting together effectively a tiger team, a proactive, prospective policy team that worked across the agencies and then interagencies to help horizon scan for new technologies and how to ensure that they got to market safely and efficiently. And I got to work on both food and drugs. And I think Jack Bobo is also here on the call as well. Jack was at State working on the state side for promoting this work. And so there was this combined effort across the government. And so I was doing that there. So combined, and I worked on stem cell policy as well. And I realized, just Michael, the short version is I really wanted to continue doing what I called public service in the private sector. And I wanted to help companies bring products to market. And I think a lot of people even I still have to think of Memphis, Upside Foods, do the same. So that's what I think what brought me here was that short journey.
So 2010 to 2016, federal regulator and doing horizon scanning for the FDA. And on the horizon, maybe really far out, maybe too far to see, for a lot of government folks, was this idea of cell cultured meat. I mean, was that seems maybe a little bit early for the government to develop any frameworks or official policy around, hey, we want to make meat in bioreactors and let's put some policy around that. Was that a little bit too early in terms of the industry for the government to get involved?
Yeah, interesting. So you would think that, and all of this is prognosticated on the notion that scientists back then knew that they couldn't anticipate what types of technologies would come down the pipe. So they developed policy that was flexible enough to anticipate and accommodate new technologies as best as they could think through. So in reality, we do have a framework. It's called literally the Coordinated Framework for the Regulation of Biotechnology. And it has been around for decades. Okay. But the regulatory system, some people will I think fairly criticize it for its weightiness at times, and the idea you've heard like open face sandwiches versus closed face and who regulates. But to be fair, its comprehensiveness and complexity is a fantastic indicator of its ability to accommodate new things quickly, in my mind. And cultured meat is no different. So the system for us to be regulated, while not anticipated directly, is more than adequate to regulate us as an industry. And I'm happy to go into it if you'd like at any point.
So there's a robust underlying framework that is adapted to any new technology is what I'm hearing from you. But were there, as part of your job, were you, as you scan this horizon, were you maybe putting in papers or saying, hey, this is going to be a new thing, there'll be startups? I mean, clearly, MOSA, and then not too soon after that, Memphis had really interesting scientists who said, let's make food out of cells reproduced in bioreactors. That was happening around this time while you're still working for the FDA. So at the time, were you saying, hey, this is a trend we have to just pay close attention to?
I'll be fair. Like it's, I mean, in scientific circles, in sort of my scientific realm, this is not a new idea. And,
yeah.
Again,
yep.
This is a well-known concept.
Well, yeah, NASA did it with like goldfish, like in the early 2000s, right? Like, so people were doing it, not necessarily for food production.
The idea is very, very, and like, and even with Mark Post and what became MOSA, he hadn't incorporated. That wasn't a company. That was an academic venture to see if we could do it. And then at the time, Memphis, which is now Upside, came along in 2015. We're the first to attempt to fully commercialize this. Very first company in the world to do this. But you're right, at the agencies. Wasn't actively discussed to my knowledge. However, the idea, though, of using cell culture to produce food, very well aware. But also, more importantly, the notion of using, again, optimizing animals, the policy that all went in, for example, with new plant varieties and new animal varieties, and all of the ecosystem was already there. You could see it was ripe for just effectively popping onto the scene. And then it needed a company to sort of kickstart it because it was right now, at that point, it was living in the academic realm. So
Uma and a couple co-founders start this. And in 2016, you get a call. I don't know if you knew Uma before that, but what was that initial reach out like? And did you have a relationship before he reached out to you about the job?
No. Shamelessly, I reached out to him, like many of the early employees. Like I think we all opted in for very different reasons. And by the way, I apologize for the groan that I'm sure is about to occur. I found Uma because of Reddit. So I was browsing Reddit and I happened to see a couple of stories that popped about, the company and the meatball prototype. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I bet they're having to do X, Y, and Z. Their regulatory challenges are going to be super interesting. And so I reached out to him because they were looking for an embryonic stem cell biologist at the time. And they needed someone to help start their cell line development division. And I happen to have those skills, although I'm a professional scientist, I don't like being on the bench. I think there's many ways to serve your community with science. But we talked over several months and got to know each other and really kicked it off. And I really loved what he was trying to do. And Uma's a fantastic human being. He's a medical doctor. He's lived his life in the service of others, and he just wanted to see this come to be. I mean, it's just his brainchild, and he's wanted to do it for a long time, and he was hell bent on making it happen. And I wanted to join that rocket ship.
And so you joined them. You joined them in I think mid 2016 or so. And
yeah, correct. Well, yeah, the end of the summer. Uma did my interview outside the UN building. He was speaking there, and he asked me if I could come up to New York. And I got on a Bolt bus. If anyone knows DC, that was super fun. It was quality transportation up the Northeast corridor, and did my interview with him outside of the UN building. We just immediately kicked it off. I ran across Manhattan in a suit. I was sweaty. He was, of course, poised and ready to go on stage, and we had a great talk. And he went back in and gave his talk, and I accepted, and I moved out to the West Coast, sight unseen, a few weeks later.
Sweaty bus ride and all. You got the job. Congratulations. And so you helped lead the cell-based meat design, and then did you shape his thinking a little bit? Because you as you're fishing those original Reddit threads, you said, the regulatory hurdles are going to be big. Was that top of mind for him, or did you start to convince him that you really needed to frame your product development around these guidelines?
Yeah, it's very and Uma's leadership style is very collaborative and thought partnership. He very much surrounds himself, and I say this through the entire company, with subject matter experts or world experts in their own domain, and sort of brings them over and has them think laterally. But you're right. For this particular aspect, excuse me, he made me a deal and said, help me get the cell line division off the ground. We'll hand it off to someone later, but also, can you in parallel start thinking about how we're going to build this regulatory system? And I said, you're going to need to be thinking about regulatory affairs now, well in advance of a product going out to market. I knew that the government was going to need to be educated because, again, this industry was built by the industry. The expertise does not live, this is not a knock, within the U.S. government yet. It will be. I hope someone here on this call decides to go to the government and bring their expertise there to help them do their jobs as well. So we decided to build what's called early and often in the government, an early and often approach. Go in, talk to them early, talk about, and then treat the U.S. government as a partner. And we have done that. I'm very, very proud of that. It's not common for startups to do this. A very typical approach, of course, is well known out here, sort of move fast and break things. And when it comes to food, that's not necessarily the most appropriate approach. People need to trust that their food is safe. Food is tradition. And so this idea of bringing consumers and regulators and everyone else along with us, this journey to show that and earn their trust and show that we're doing this the right way in an expedient way as well, was the core of how we approached the regulatory process early on.
So, and I want to talk a little bit more about the government. I do want to get into, Upside and the products you'll be rolling out, and that's super exciting. But because I haven't really talked to many folks familiar as deeply as you are on the scientific regulatory side. And so I'd be curious about your thoughts about the current state of, and maybe who you talk to and where kind of the center of gravity is in kind of building this regulatory framework out for this space and helping encourage it in the U.S. I mean, if you look at like Singapore and other places, it seems like a lot of companies are setting up shop over there, like Eat Just, because it's just really encouraging there and really kind of favorable for these guys. And this is maybe completely disconnected from like where like the U.S. policy. But I saw that there's a new Republic story that Liz Speck tweeted out about how John Kerry, head of climate change initiatives for Biden, really didn't seem to. The whole story is framed around how John Kerry really didn't seem to understand how cows really do impact climate change, and it seemed to be kind of this was a disappointment. I don't think Kerry's necessarily the driving force around like what these policies will be, but maybe you can kind of educate me, like where is the U.S. and where's the Biden administration on hey, creating like a really conducive and good framework for the cell-based companies to set up shop, cellular agriculture-based companies to set up shop here to put the products out in the U.S. Where is that today? I mean, and how has it changed over the past couple of years?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to. I'll caveat, of course, as a good scientist will, with it depends, and I'm not in the prediction business necessarily.
Sure.
What I can tell you is of course, in the Biden, Biden administration itself will tell you, directly. So what I'm saying is from my limited perspective. The notion, what we've seen largely is allowing, irrespective of the particular administration, the FDA and USDA have a very, very robust tradition of using science and evidence to lead the way on policy and effectively letting the steady march of progress intellectually guide their approach. I can say that from personal experience. So I think that's what's happening here. And I think the evidence points to that as well. The staff servants, the civil servants, the careers as they're called, not the political appointees, really are driving this process at both agencies. And so even in the current administration, there is this incredible drumbeat to get this product and process out the door. And to your point about Singapore, amazing. It's a very much a rising tides benefits all ships regulatorily. And also, that there's going to be a need eventually for international harmonization on these products as well. If we're going to be shipping them around the world, talking about them regulatorily is a big deal. That's not really highlighted right now, but that will have to happen with time. But, we're a U.S.-based company, so of course we're focused on the U.S. and the FDA and USDA are, in my mind, the sort of gold standard for regulatory approvals in terms of food safety and also fostering innovation in the food supply. So we really want to get products out here, show that we can scale it, and then work with international partners, which we're currently working with as well, to sort of get our products globally into the hands of consumers. So, in short, the U.S. system, I still see as sort of the center of weight, center of mass, as you've mentioned, just from a regulatory standpoint. They really have been, I think, they continue to be really active. But again, global centers of innovation are also going to be very, very important, and again, benefits everybody.
I do want to get into the company and some of the news that you guys recently announced. First of all, I mean, we mentioned it earlier. You guys switched your name from Memphis Meats to Upside. I think it's a great brand name. I don't know if there's like a description of why you guys did that. I mean, it makes sense to me just because it seems more of a friendly consumer brand. But I think the bigger news is you guys actually announced what your first product is going to be, which is chicken, which I think is pretty cool. So why did you guys choose chicken?
Well, it's for us. I mean, it's delicious. It's the fastest growing meat being consumed globally, and we wanted to bring a delicious version of chicken out to consumers. I think that it's really, for us, it's that simple. And also, I mean, I'm a Southerner, so like fried chicken is what I think of when I think of sort of the food I want to make as well. But I think it's also just really an adaptable meat product. It can be a blank canvas. It can be the star. It doesn't have to be sort of like with a ribeye. You kind of have a ribeye. Delicious. Don't get me wrong, but that is what eventually we'll be going to, those sorts of products. But again, with chicken, we think it's just a great product to go to market with. But to the broader rebranding, I think that's also part of it. We wanted to announce the product we're going to the world with, and it's I think candidly it represents the upside of food, but also this. We want to be the brand of choice for, the next generation of meat lovers. And so we wanted to be able to just represent that as a commercial entity and sort of the evolution of the company. So
I don't know, you could certainly just tell me what the public information that's out there around what Upside has been building, but you developed the original cell lines. Is there plans to come out with a variety of all types of meat, beef, pork, etc.? Is that kind of on the roadmap?
Yeah, exactly. We want to be, again, a full stack producer. This is a platform. There are different ways to approach this. At Upside, we've decided we're a meat, poultry, and seafood producer, and we are working on all three. We're going to market with chicken. That's what we want to get in consumers' hands, but we're working on many different things simultaneously. And the people, and to be fair, I very quickly handed off the cell line division to much more talented scientists than myself. So the work that's being done, I want to make sure is credited to those people at the company. So the people that are running the cell line division and the scale division as well, process development, are leading the technical development of this platform. And yes, we will be bringing multiple different types of products to consumers. But the goal is to get meat you know and love in your hands, and in this new way of production that we think is great for the environment.
And I think part of the news also is that you've broken ground in San Francisco on a plant. I think Jen in her article described it as a full stack production plant. So maybe she got that language from you guys. And I don't know how familiar or how much you're thinking about the production. I would imagine you're pretty familiar at least a certain level. Is this beyond pilot production? This is actually scaled production plants that we're talking about here?
It is. It's scaled, but yeah. To be clear, it will be sort of our prove out ground. Okay. Our technology prove out ground. We wanted to have effectively like a home base for production, and we're going to be trying new things. And this facility really reflects. And to say it's pilot, I think it sort of does it a disservice. It really is a technology development and production platform. It'll be inspected by both USDA and FDA. It will produce saleable material, like we're going to be sending material out that people can eat and products that people can eat. But it will always be a place where we're trying out new things. And that's really the core. And so our team is able to try out the new production and then eventually moving to full commercial scale production facilities in the future, where we're rolling out at the truly mind-bogglingly large amounts of meat that are produced in the world on a daily basis. But that is our goal. But this will be scale production compared to the current levels of production. We think will be at the time of its launch. We think will be the largest production facility in the world.
And it's a facility that'll spin out all the different types of meat and protein that you talked about, right? You talked about poultry, beef, meat, and as well as seafood, all out of this San Francisco plant?
That's correct. That is correct.
And I'm curious if you could talk to the seafood. Were you involved in the cell line development of that? I mean, because it seems like talking to Lou over at Blue Nalu, it's definitely a different product. The manufacturing is different. I mean, can you talk to like this uniqueness of cell-based seafood and what that looks like?
Sure, a touch. And to be fair, you're right. I was not involved in the seafood cell line development, so I'll be brief. It is different, obviously. Growing aquatic organisms, freshwater, saltwater, and I can speak. I did regulate seafood products when I was at the agency, so I do have some semblance of understanding. Well, one, just breaking it down, FDA, of course, has the regulatory authority over seafood products in the United States, except for catfish. That's USDA. So the regulatory regime is different. Huh. Second, you're right. The biology is fundamentally different too. They evolved for different purposes. So the terrestrial animals versus aquatic are different. So even sort of it is the fundamental challenges of culturing are not different. Meaning you have to get cells from an animal, high quality animal. Then you have to grow them in a clean facility. You have to grow a lot of them. You have to ensure that they grow consistently and produce product. Those are challenges regardless of species. But of course, the technical solutions for, say, a salmon versus, or again, chicken are going to be different in the specific requirements. But the overall challenges do not change fundamentally.
I just can't get my mind around, like you mentioned, for some reason, catfish is regulated by a different agency. Why is that? I know that's like a tangent, but.
Oh, the simplest answer is political will. Okay. And it was a desire to reflect what, without going into the whole history of it, and I say that not as a disparagement of the political will. Like it was a fair fight, and the arguments were compelling. But the bottom line is, catfish is regulated by USDA because it's primarily a U.S.-based industry, and for global competitive reasons, it got moved over to USDA. Just as a topper note, USDA's laws allow them; they're compelled to promote U.S. agriculture interests, and Jack probably could speak to this much better than I can. Whereas FDA is what's considered a neutral arbiter of risk. They are neither for nor against technologies. And that's an important nuance that's lost. And I say that for both food and drugs. In the United States, drugs are unsafe unless shown otherwise under the law. And food is the opposite. It is deemed safe unless shown otherwise under the law. That's the big difference between food and drugs. But FDA can't be for or against something. USDA must promote whatever's under its purview, if that makes sense. And so that's sort of another.
There does seem to be, there is a little kind of like tug and pull between the two agencies, right? I mean, I feel like, was it the FDA that tried to pull genetic engineered animals away from the USDA, or is it the other way around? Talking like CRISPR, for example, over the past year or so.
Yeah. It's funny as you say that. From my perch, from where I'm standing, I can actually see Caribou Biosciences. Jennifer Doudna's CRISPR company is right down the street, which is sort of the weird, wonderful part about being in the Bay Area. But you're right. USDA decided they really wanted these products, and I can't speak to. I don't know all of the nuances of this particular argument. But just for the audience here, genetically engineered animals. I worked on these projects, and these are regulated by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration currently, and USDA wants to regulate them. And the arguments are interesting nonetheless, but currently FDA regulates genetically engineered animals. We'll see how this shapes up if they get moved over to USDA.
So, I wish Jack was here. I think he stepped out, but one of the things I heard him talk about is how all these different constituencies within the traditional ag and cellular ag need to work together. And oftentimes they're pitted against each other because, you have incumbents. People see their livelihoods as being threatened. At the end of the day, though, everyone's producing protein and producing food for the population on Earth. And so I imagine you think a lot about this and kind of how this industry needs to evolve and how these different kind of forces are kind of pitted against each other, whether it makes sense or not. But I'm curious about if you look at traditional agriculture and like how you kind of positioned cellular agriculture to them and how this can be win-win, have you given that much thought? Is that something that you think can be kind of structured in a way, or you can maybe use the levers in government, the levers in private enterprise to kind of help that move more smoothly?
Absolutely. I mean, we actually have, it's one of the values of the company, this big tent mentality that, and that derives from this. And this has been baked in the company architecture since basically day one. This notion that effectively it takes a village, one, to do anything, that like, and that no one single entity has all of the solutions, every viewpoint. There's no panopticon sort of viewpoint on solutions to these big global issues, like feeding a growing population of people sustainably. And I completely agree with you, Michael. This notion, and we have lived this value of proactively finding common ground with people that might, on the surface, you would think would be antagonistic to our particular industry or where we're going. But in reality, we share a lot of common ground. And we have gone out of our way we currently work with the North American Meat Institute, and we've publicly worked together multiple times, and we consider them good friends in terms of the partnership that we've seen as they've evolved their own leadership. They've been a fantastic organization representing the meat processors of the world. Most recently with the National Fisheries Institute as well on the labeling of these products. But of course, even broader stakeholder sets as well. The goal is to realize that this is an and, not an or solution, right? The meat industry is huge, unimaginably huge, one of the largest addressable markets on the globe. And it is only getting larger. The next 50 years, expecting meat demand to double and population hit 10 billion people. And feeding that many people simultaneously is going to take everybody working together. And so we see ourselves as a part of that, and have actively worked to build bridges where people might assume we would just find enemies. We just think you get more bees with honey than vinegar.
I'm inviting Andreas up on stage. Hey, Andreas, you have a question for Eric?
Yes, hello. We have a bunch of rescue cats, so I'm curious how far out is cell-cultured pet foods out?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. I think probably closer than you would imagine, but further than you'd probably anticipate. There's over 60 companies worldwide, and I don't even know all of them anymore. We formed a coalition, even, to be honest with you. Again, so there might be already one that exists, and I'm just unaware of it. So what, it might already exist. But two, the challenges don't change for pet food. In fact, pet food in some instances is regulated even tighter than human food, although it is subject generally to the same standards of evaluation. So I can't tell you when, but I can tell you that it's probably going to happen. I see that as something that's probably just an obvious solution and a chance to also bring some very cool stuff to the world. And also kudos for having all the cats. My cats are hanging outside the door right now too, trying to get in, wondering who I'm talking to. There's
a lot of progress in plant-based cat and dog food, though, that I think will be the bridge between that, and the cell-based stuff in the future.
Yeah, ADA Cardano has like a meat blockchain going. I was curious, like if anything in the blockchain technology world is, going to be part of the cell-cultured meat community.
So I'm going to borrow from Niels Bohr, the father of quantum theory, and say that anyone that claims to understand blockchain does not understand blockchain. And so I don't know enough about it to even opine, candidly. My mind has been focused entirely on biological systems and producing food from them. So I wish I could say more, but I truly don't. I don't know enough to opine. It's a very interesting idea, though. Maybe you should tell me down the line, figure it out, and tell me what we should be doing.
Well, thank you, Andreas, for that question. I will say that now blockchain, from the intersection with food that I've seen, is largely around provenance and transparency. So maybe there's like a point there where people would want to know exactly where the cell lines are developed from, where blockchain could help down the line. but it does seem a bit of a stretch at this point. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to raise your hands. We can bring you up on stage. I would say, Eric, looking forward and kind of what you're excited about around the stuff you think about every day. What are some of the things you're excited about? Is it the fact that like you guys are coming out with your meat? I think you said in 2022. What are some things you're excited about in the space?
Well, I mean, I'm most excited about bringing the product to the world. Like, I want to bring a safe, delicious, high quality product. Like that. I mean, it's not magic. I want people to buy this and go, oh, this is delicious chicken, and it happens to be made in this particular way. But that's not necessarily the key factor. I'm excited to see this become just a part of everyday life, basically. And then once it does, this notion also of continuing to bring, Upside Foods again more broadly to global food system as well, not just the United States, but also broadly getting products out. Also exciting to see also the competition that will occur as well within the industry and with conventional meat products, as well as I'm sure eventually with plant-based products as well. It's going to be very interesting to see how consumers perceive these products, including ours. And so I obviously think like Upside's going to produce delicious products, and I hope that we win on market. More technically, again, the possibility of where products can go. Uma, being a cardiologist, has always stated, that he'd really like to see products that reflect sort of potentially like heart healthy meats, like low saturated fat red meat, for example. And so that is sort of horizon scanning. We're not, nothing on the market for us anytime soon. But this idea of bringing products that can be thought of from a different nutritional landscape or aspect, I should say. Have you
guys ruled out things like CRISPR, genetic engineering for your food? I mean, is that something like, hey, so you talk about like maybe making a better version of the meat that we eat. I mean, clearly stuff will be cleaner if it's grown in a bioreactor, but have you thought about using CRISPR to make just superior versions of like what we see?
Well, I mean, let's that word superior is doing some heavy lifting, Michael. But the idea, I think I gather what you're saying, but yeah, this idea. Well,
if you could cut out the net, like here's a part of the food that is generally maybe bad for our health, for example, just kind of generalize.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the answer is, I mean, we use genetic engineering as a tool in our toolbox currently. We've been very upfront about that. Currently, the products that we've debuted previously are not genetically engineered, and we do use genetic engineering in our toolbox. It is a very useful tool and well understood. And I'm saying this also as a genetic engineer and a federal regulator and policymaker of genetic engineering in food. That for other products, it is an exception. As I'm just going to borrow the line from the government because I think it is very, very well understood and still as safe as food as you eat every day. Whether it can be safer, that is a claim. Those claims have to be specifically validated, and that's a high bar, but very doable. So FDA would evaluate those claims, by the way.
Well, I mean, when I talk about genetic engineering, I'm talking more like CRISPR, which I think the U.S. government doesn't consider GMO, but Europe does. So I was particularly talking about things like gene editing.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, gene editing is considered, scientifically is considered a form of genetic engineering, maybe a subset. But again, nuance aside, I hear your point. For the U.S., and of course has to develop a policy on it. Yep. But again, I will say that the policy that exists right now can evaluate gene-edited foods. So FDA has the policy and the framework to evaluate the risks that would be associated with gene-edited foods right now. That doesn't need new scientific evidence. The risk frameworks and risk assessments are already there and in place to be able to evaluate gene editing in food products. So it really just takes a company that's deciding to do that type of work and then presenting their safety evidence to the agency. Labeling is a whole different question, of course.
Hey, Brahm, you have a question for Eric?
Yeah. Hey, thanks very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Eric, congratulations on the rebranding and all the fantastic progress so far. I can't wait to taste the chicken when it comes out. I had a question about commercialization. And, in synthetic biology, sort of industrial scale, fermentation, et cetera, a key bottleneck seems to be being able to scale the production itself, the bioprocessing cost effectively. And that's seen as a bottleneck that needs to be overcome for mass sort of commercialization. And I'm wondering with Upside, your production processes, is that the major bottleneck and hurdle you're needing to overcome, or is it sort of legacy supply chain infrastructure, or both? Thank you.
So, yeah, of course. And is it Bram or Brahm?
Sorry, Bram.
Bram. Thank you. Thank you for the thoughtful question.
Right on.
I really appreciate it. This isn't magic. I wish I could say there's something special here, but in reality, it is sort of yeoman. I mean, yeoman's like, we have to work. We have to just sort of get through. The innovation to get there is extraordinary. And we've hired, again, as I mentioned before, subject matter experts or world experts they all left like they're fantastic, whatever they were doing before. And for some reason, we all get to work with each other and learn from each other. I truly, truly, I'm amazed by the people I work with. Like, unbelievably intelligent. But to your question, how do we solve these? You're right. It's scaling up is really truly the sort of the hardest goal. So one, we think, of course, scaling really does address a lot of the cost issues as well. That a lot of the previous sort of estimates for the work and the cost are based on a biopharmaceutical industrial fermentation model, which don't necessarily translate one-to-one to this industry. There's just a lot of like, well, it's been done this way, so it must cost this much. That's not true necessarily. And then you're right, like you hit supply chain considerations as well. And those are very important as well to consider as we build out this global ecosystem. And the neat thing about what we're doing is that because of the global food ecosystem, we can take advantage of, a different distribution network than, say, what would have been used for the biopharmaceutical industry, if you want to use that as an analogous model, which I don't think is entirely appropriate. But because like food fermentation, distribution chains are very interesting. But you're right. I mean, all of this comes down to scaling up, again, to lower the cost, but doing it consistently and safely. And then, of course, negotiating down some of those or reconfiguring how people think about legacy global supply chain networks. Thank you for the question. It's very good.
Yeah, great question. Hey, Vince, how are you? Welcome to the stage. You have a question for Eric?
Thanks a lot. Yes, I have a question for Eric. First of all, congrats on the rebranding and getting closer and closer, right, to commercialization. Part of that commercialization picture is, of course, the regulatory pathway. And I think you're doing a fantastic job. It's almost self-explanatory why that is, of course, with your background. But are you worried about competitors and how they're interacting with the agencies on their specific products and processes? And is there a need to coordinate efforts in that sense?
Thanks, Vince. And full disclosure, Vince and I have been on other panels before, and I consider Vince a close colleague and also subject matter expert in the regulatory space. Well, Michael, future guest. Wink, wink, not.
Thanks.
So good question, Vince. Yeah, of course. We've also formed, we formed a coalition to the audience here as well. We formed a coalition as well of across the spectrum of the producers in order to coordinate interests. But you're right, and so of course you have that sort of ability to negotiate collectively. But from a regulatory standpoint, of course, like I can't speak for other companies. Like they're going to go and if they decide to speak to the agencies, they can say what they want to say to the agencies. But you're right. I think the most important thing, and if I have any other culture producers in the line or people considering it, I highly, highly encourage you to work together with other cultured companies to coordinate in terms of this safety establishment, if possible, but also to use the formal agreement between FDA and USDA that has been on the books now for 2 years to build out a safety establishment program. Again, this isn't rocket science, as Vince knows very well. There's a well-established system to establish the safety using risk-based methods in the United States. And those methods, while they vary for individual products, ultimately do not vary that much in terms of what is allowable or not allowable in food to make something safe or not. So, again, I think the system itself has some boundaries on it, but you're right, Vince. You don't want anyone bull rushing the market without talking to the FDA bare minimum. You have to get FDA's agreement with your safety in order to ensure that consumers believe these products are safe. It's very, very important that consumers see that FDA looked at this and determined the safety of these products first.
Continuing on that, Eric, do you think there are possibly some unanswered questions or concerns that regulators may have that could be addressed collectively, either by company research or public research?
Yeah, I think the best place here is one. You're never going to get around the idea of intellectual property and confidential commercial information, right? Like that is going to be that is a prerogative that companies must abide by when disclosing information. So what I think is also really good, I'm a big believer, by having worked in all three areas, this sort of holy trinity of academia, private industry, and the federal government, is making sure that we always have ground truth documents coming out of academia, that both the government and industry can constructively debate around. I think that is the most important thing we can be doing right now, is building up centers of excellence around cell culture products. We have one at Davis, one at Tufts. There's one potentially coming up Nebraska and Purdue. This idea that we're producing ground truth reality, sort of guardrails of reality documents that can help regulators, help industry form sort of the basis for these, as Vince, as you know, if there are unanswered questions, how to address them.
Great questions, Vince. Eric, those centers of excellence that you talked about, are those official programs? Are they just like loosely affiliated kind of professors doing residency? What do those look like?
As you can imagine, this is a brand new field of science, basically, in terms of being built by industry. So what's happening, at least at UC Davis, was as a National Science Foundation funded grant, I think across 11 PIs, and full disclosure, Upside's on the advisory board, external advisory board. And they're doing the sort of first ever collaboration on effectively building a program around cell culture products for this purpose. And then Tufts University also has at least one PI who's doing research dedicatedly into David Kaplan doing work on this as well. And so we're trying to see as more and more universities, and of course we want federal investment in this as well at some point for cell culture products across the academic ecosystem globally. But those are the two that are sort of off the ground that I know of, and I know that other universities, again, like Nebraska and Purdue, are considering doing something like this as well, establishing a center for cell culture work.
Eric, you mentioned a couple of times an industry, essentially coalition that's been built. Can you give a little more detail on that?
Absolutely. It's called the Alliance for Meat, Poultry, and Seafood Innovation, and Upside was a founding member. But basically, as everyone here knows, anyone in the food industry, basically you join and form coalitions or trade associations. So we don't have full-time staff yet, so it's not a trade association by definition. It's a coalition of cell culture meat producers across the spectrum, meat, poultry, seafood. There are 8 members currently. And of course, it's for U.S.-based companies or companies intending to sell in the United States. So if you're interested, I'm happy to help fill in any gaps. If you're interested, reach out to me.
Is there a website yet?
There is, ampsinnovation.org, I believe. Or it might, actually, I'd have to look off the top of my head. My point is you can Google AMPS Innovation and you will find it. And yes, we represent our interests, and we work together on trying to find common ground, build sensible policy, help each other as best we can in a pre-revenue, pre-market way. But of course, once we're on market, we are going to continue to work together to sort of advocate for our own interests as an industry and continue to build bridges to other industries as well.
how would you characterize? So this ultimately become something that grows into essentially a trade association, a lobbying group, or is it mainly just, or we don't know what it's going to become eventually? It's just too early. Right now it's like, let's work together.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. I mean, the goal is as you grow, you build a trade association, you build a group that represents your industry's interests. That's important. No one company can sort of speak for everyone, but of course a trade association can do that sort of thing. And we knew it was important to start organizing our thoughts early as companies were getting online and sort of financially invested in this space to sort of come together and go, okay, well, let's put our dollars together and our minds together on how we're actually going to represent ourselves to stakeholders. It's been largely very successful, helping educate a very broad stakeholder set on the industry, the state of affairs, where we're going as an industry, and where we think we're going in terms of our interests.
Matthew Suhanto, I think I pronounced that right. Welcome to the stage. Do you have a question for Eric?
Yeah, I have a question. Quick question for me, sir. I don't know if you've already addressed it before, but first of all, congratulations on the rebranding of Memphis Meat to Upside Food and releasing your first product, becoming the first cell culture product on the market later in the year. I just want to say, because I really looked through like this industry, the cell culture industry. I attended. Since I'm a UC Davis student, I attended, you had like a seminar with Professor Block, I think later, early on during the year. And because of that, I joined this UC Davis, the Cultivated Meat Research that you just mentioned. And it really drew me into wanting to enter the cell culture industry, hopefully in the future after I graduate. But I have like a quick question. I don't know if you've already addressed this. You said that you chose chicken because it's like one of the most diverse and one of the most well-eaten meat, not just in America but throughout the world. But what makes you decide to release it this year? Because I remember one of the biggest challenges for cell culture meat is the cost, especially to actually grow the meat itself. But what makes it different with chicken, and what are the signs that, that Upside Food now decides that, okay, we can do this year?
I mean, it's, as you can imagine, it's complicated. It's operational, it's regulatory, it's technical. But you're right. I think the biggest thing, of course, and just very, very candidly, of course, is regulatory evaluation, safety establishment. So that we have, we work with the U.S. government. We'll continue to, but that is both on us and the U.S. government. So I can't put any predictions on it. So it's always caveated with pending regulatory review. But going to market in general, of course, is, do we believe we have a delicious product? It's a very simple question. Is this delicious? One, assuming safety, by the way. Is this a delicious product that consumers are going to want to eat? That's really what drives us. It's in some ways, food is simple in that way. Will consumers desire this product? And then to your question about cost, what's really important, obviously, is we want to know, like, it's to some extent, it's what the market will bear as well. Like what are consumers willing to pay? But I will tell you that our goal, of course, is to be wherever meat is sold at, cost parity or below meat products that already exist on market. But we are going to enter likely restaurants first, working with culinary professionals, selling our products there to get critical feedback first. And we think that's really important to improve the product as we come down in price, which it is. Our products are a lot less expensive than you would think, very much within the range of I think we believe most people in terms of our first generation of products, and they will only continue to come down. But Matthew, just on a completely separate note, I just wanted to tell you, and Michael, I hope it's okay to do this, but I just want to say congratulations, and I hope you continue doing this. The world needs you, and if there's any other students here listening or anyone considering getting in this field, I can almost certainly say, like, we want you. You almost have a job. One of the things, working in a space like this that helps address climate change is one of the most important things you potentially could do with your life. And being in the service of others through scientific and engineering methods or operational or marketing, whatever it is to get in this industry, we need you. And I want to encourage you all to use your brains to help build a better world. And you can do it. So Matthew, I hope that you continue going down this path. And if not with Upside, create your own company or provide academic research or go work in the government. But you can do it. And I appreciate you, thinking about this and working down this path.
Thank you so much.
Great question. And it's cool that you actually heard Eric speak. He inspired you a bit. Great that you came here on Clubhouse. I do want to follow up a little bit on his question. It does seem like chicken is kind of moving ahead of everything else. You've seen super meat in Israel. Eat Just is just seems like chicken for them is really what they're going to scale first. Is there something unique about chicken that, we're moving faster? I mean, obviously it seems like, marbled whole cuts of beef is like a complex meat to produce. Is that part of the reason that chicken is maybe just more uniform and homogenous? Or am I oversimplifying things?
No. I think that's part of it. Of course, it's multifaceted, and I can't speak to other companies, obviously. But the notion of building out a well marbled steak at scale is a challenge, and that's the goal, I think, for a lot of people. This idea of a perfect ribeye, that's been broiled appropriately and has the perfect texture and aroma. That's the goal. We just think that, again, for us, it was just an obvious choice. Poultry is a delicious meat that is very versatile. We are able to, producing and cost effectively, but also, I think, again, it hits the widest palate as well. And we just really liked how it came out. And we were like, I think in part, let's bring this to show that we can do the world's almost most popular meat. Basically, we think it's going to anticipate that. And I think that primarily drove a lot of our decision at that point. But the bottom line is to not just, I wouldn't focus necessarily on chicken, is the notion that, again, multi-platform and bringing lots of different types of products to market. And I think that what you should be doing is keeping your eye on the ball and seeing what's coming next. It's going to be exciting. We're just getting started.
Great. Jennifer, you get the last question for Eric. Welcome to the stage, Jennifer.
Oh, hi. I wasn't really planning on speaking. It was interesting to listen, but I work for a large ag trade show. Always looking at innovations. From what I'm hearing you say, sorry, I've been doing a couple things, but it doesn't sound like cell cultured meat is looking to eliminate animal agriculture. But as you mentioned, we definitely need some supplements to the demands that are coming in the next 10, 20, 30 years and beyond. Am I understanding that correctly? I definitely heard you when you're saying looking to partner with ag and lots of different ways we need to feed people in our world, especially since we're not doing it effectively already everywhere in the world. Am I getting that right? What are the long-term things that I may have missed?
That's accurate, Jennifer. I think, I can't speak for other companies in the space and other industries, but you're right. We see ourselves as and not or. Jennifer, how large this market is, and that it's even just the delta in change of the demand that's going to occur in the next 50 years. We think that's a multi-billion-dollar industry for us.
Yeah.
And so, candidly, again, at Upside, we walk the walk. We work publicly with these groups to show that is where we intend to go and what we believe as well. But you're absolutely right. We're always going to need high quality animal cells, just bluntly, of course, right? These come from animals as well. So, and if people choose to buy conventional meat products, we're not here to tell you what to do. We do obviously believe that we want to produce great products and compete on market. That's our goal. And I think that's a fair approach to this. And I think but at the end of the day, we want to give consumers choice. And we know that the ag industry, and I've said this multiple times in many different fora, is if you want to look at the adoption of new innovations, the ag sector is a paragon of looking ahead and adopting a new product or technology and making it mainstreaming consumers. So again, totally see and I agree with what you said, Jennifer.
Hey, well, Eric, we're at an hour, and I want to thank you for taking time. I know you're busy. You have a lot of things, a lot of balls in there. And so thank you for spending time with us. I really love your enthusiasm and your inspiration that you're giving to folks who are young in the space and encouraging folks to really embrace science. So it's been great spending time with you, man.
Thank you so much, Michael, for having us in. And again, to everyone listening, thank you for your time.
Yeah, and make
really
sure
evaluate as much.
Make sure you follow Eric. This is your first Clubhouse, a new Android Clubhouse user. That's exciting. And this will be coming out as a podcast. So, folks, if you missed the early part of the conversation, just keep an eye out. So, hey, Eric, thanks a lot, man.
Thank you so much.